Every police officer remembers their first patrol, but for rookie Daniel Murphy, it was a day that would test not only his nerves, but also his conscience. Paired with a hardened veteran who believed toughness was the only way to survive, Daniel was eager to prove himself. Neither of them could have guessed that a simple stop outside a neighborhood clinic would spiral into a moment that changed their careers forever. The morning sun spilled across the quiet suburban streets, painting them in shades of gold and orange. Officer Daniel Murphy adjusted his freshly pressed uniform, smoothing the creases one more time before stepping out of the precinct. The badge gleamed on his chest, polished so thoroughly it caught every ray of sunlight. At 24 years old, Daniel had dreamed about this day for years, and now it had finally come. His first official patrol. Excitement and nerves wrestled inside him. He had spent months in training, shooting ranges, defensive tactics, countless hours memorizing procedures and codes. But this was different. This was real. Real people. Real decisions. Real consequences. His heart thumped hard, not out of fear exactly, but out of a desire to prove himself worthy of the uniform he wore. Standing by the patrol car was Sergeant William Harris, the man assigned as his partner and mentor. Harris was everything Daniel was not. Older, broader, and with an expression carved out of granite. His salt and pepper hair and permanent frown gave him the look of a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. Rumor around the precinct was that Harris had 20 years on the force, most of them spent in so-called troubled neighborhoods. He carried himself like someone who had been in more fights than he could count, and he didn't hide his skepticism about rookies. "You're late, Murphy," Harris growled as Daniel approached, though Daniel had arrived 10 minutes early. It was a test, Daniel realized, and he straightened his shoulders, answering firmly. "No, sir. Right on time." Harris snorted and unlocked the cruiser. "First lesson, you're always late in my book. Get in." The engine roared to life as the two men pulled out of the precinct lot. The inside of the cruiser smelled faintly of stale coffee and leather polish. Harris drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the radio, his eyes scanning the sidewalks like a hawk circling for prey. Daniel broke the silence. "I just want you to know, Sergeant, I'm ready. I won't let you down." Harris chuckled without humor. "Every rookie says that. Listen, kid, this isn't about shiny boots and rules you learned in the academy. Out here, people will test you. If you look soft, they'll eat you alive. You want to survive? Be tough. Don't trust anyone, especially in neighborhoods where trouble festers." "Got it." Daniel nodded, though a small knot formed in his stomach. His instructors at the academy had emphasized fairness, community policing, and treating everyone with dignity. Harris's philosophy felt like the opposite. Still, this was his superior. He had to learn. The cruiser rolled past neat rows of houses. Children pedaled bicycles along the sidewalks. Women watered gardens. Men loaded trucks for work. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, yet Harris muttered under his breath, "Looks quiet now. Give it time." As the patrol continued, Daniel kept sneaking glances at his mentor, trying to absorb his mannerisms, his confidence. Harris seemed perpetually tense, jaw tight, scanning for threats where Daniel saw ordinary life. Half an hour into their shift, they turned onto Main Street, the heart of the community. Small businesses lined the road, a barber shop, a bakery, a pharmacy. Near the corner stood a modest but well-kept building with a sign that read, Carter Community Health Clinic. In front of the clinic, a tall black man stood, his posture relaxed but purposeful. He wore a white coat loosely draped over his shoulders and held a phone to his ear. His expression was calm, but there was an unmistakable authority in the way he carried himself, as though he belonged not just to the building but to the street itself. Daniel noticed the man first and thought little of it. Probably just a doctor taking a call. But Harris slowed the cruiser, narrowing his eyes. "What do we have here?" Harris muttered. Daniel frowned. "Just looks like someone outside his clinic. Or," Harris countered, "someone hanging around where he doesn't belong. You see, Murphy, it's never what it looks like. Guys loiter around, pretending to be something they're not. Could be casing the place. Could be up to no good." Daniel hesitated. "But he's wearing a doctor's coat." "Costume shops sell those too," Harris said dryly. He pulled the cruiser to the curb and killed the engine. Let's check it out. Daniel's heart picked up. This was it, his first real field encounter. He unbuckled his seatbelt and followed Harris onto the sidewalk. The man outside the clinic glanced up briefly, but returned to his phone conversation, unbothered by their presence. Harris strode forward with the authority of someone who expected obedience. "Excuse me, sir. Can we ask what you're doing out here?" The man lowered his phone, his deep voice calm but firm. "I'm standing outside my clinic, officer. Just making a call before heading back inside." Daniel felt relief wash over him. Straightforward answer, nothing suspicious. But Harris's eyes narrowed further. "Your clinic. Huh? Got some ID to prove that?" The man's eyebrows lifted slightly. "My name is Dr. Elijah Carter. I own this clinic. My staff and patients can confirm that." Daniel blinked. Dr. Carter. The name rang faint bells. He thought he had heard it during orientation when the chief mentioned community leaders. But before he could process it, Harris stepped closer, voice hardening. "Sir, I didn't ask for a speech. I asked for ID. Now." The air seemed to thicken. A couple of passers-by slowed, sensing the tension. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, wondering if this was really necessary. Dr. Carter's calmness never wavered, though a shadow of irritation crossed his face. "Officer, I already told you who I am. If you walk inside, my entire staff will verify it. I've been running this clinic for years. Surely, there's no issue with me standing outside my own building." Harris folded his arms. "People say all sorts of things. I don't just take words at face value." Daniel cleared his throat nervously. "Sergeant, maybe..." But Harris cut him off sharply. "Quiet, Murphy. Watch and learn. This is how you handle situations before they escalate." Daniel felt heat rise in his cheeks. To him, it seemed Harris himself was escalating the situation. Dr. Carter stood taller, slipping his phone into his pocket, his gaze steady on the officers. "What exactly are you suggesting, Sergeant?" Dr. Carter asked slowly. "I'm suggesting you provide ID before we have a bigger problem," Harris replied, hand resting casually near his holster, though not drawing his weapon. Daniel's pulse quickened. This wasn't how he imagined his first patrol. The academy had drilled into him the importance of respect and de-escalation. Yet here he was, watching his mentor challenge a man who looked every bit the professional he claimed to be. Around them, more people were stopping to watch. Patients from the clinic's waiting room peeked through the glass doors. An older woman carrying a grocery bag paused on the sidewalk, frowning at the scene. Dr. Carter exhaled slowly, as though summoning patience. "Fine. I'll get my ID from inside. But officers, I'll say this once. I shouldn't have to prove I belong at my own clinic." His words hung heavy in the air. Daniel felt the truth of them, but Harris only grunted. "Go ahead, doctor. We'll be waiting, doctor." Elijah Carter stepped back to the glass doors of his clinic, the soft hiss of the automatic entrance, shutting out the uneasy stares still lingering from outside. The weight of the encounter pressed on him for a moment, a frustration he swallowed and set aside as quickly as it had come. He could not allow irritation to bleed into his work. Too many people depended on him, and in his world, every minute mattered. The reception area was busy, as usual for a weekday morning. A young mother rocked her infant while waiting to be seen. An elderly man in a worn cap tapped his cane against the tile floor. A couple of teenagers whispered over their phones, their glances occasionally darting toward the desk where a nurse efficiently moved through paperwork. When they saw Carter, the air seemed to shift. Some patients smiled in recognition, others nodded respectfully. For them, Dr. Carter wasn't just another physician. He was their doctor, a fixture in the community, someone who had been there for years. "Dr. Carter," the receptionist said, handing him a clipboard. "We got a full load today. 2 walk-ins already asking if you'll see them personally." Carter accepted the clipboard with a faint smile. "We'll do our best. Let's not turn anyone away." He moved toward the hallway, and a little boy broke free from his mother's grasp to run up to him. The child's face lit up, and Carter crouched down to meet him at eye level. "Hi, Dr. Carter. I don't even have a cough this time," the boy announced proudly. Carter chuckled. "Well, that's good news. Maybe you're here just to say hello then. He gave the boy a gentle pat on the shoulder before the mother quickly pulled him back with an embarrassed apology. Carter waved it off with warmth. He never minded such interruptions. Walking through the clinic, Carter's steps were confident but unhurried. He greeted nurses, checked on charts, and exchanged brief words with colleagues. Every detail mattered. Every file, every medication, every worried glance from a patient. He had cultivated an environment of trust, one where even the most anxious patient felt seen. But what most people didn't realize was that this clinic was just one part of his life. Elijah Carter was not only the physician in charge here. He was a visionary behind an entire network of hospitals and clinics across the state. Yet he chose to spend his mornings in this modest building on Main Street, the very neighborhood where he had grown up. As he slipped into his office, Carter allowed himself a moment of reflection. The walls bore photographs that told his story better than words ever could. One frame showed him in his early years, stethoscope around his neck, standing beside his mother outside their small home. Another captured the ribbon-cutting ceremony of this very clinic nearly 15 years ago, when he had vowed to bring quality health care back to the community that had raised him. His phone buzzed with reminders of meetings scheduled later at the regional hospital, but for now, his focus stayed local. He pulled on his white coat properly, its fabric a little worn at the edges from years of use. It wasn't the coat that gave him authority, he often told his staff. It was a commitment behind it. The morning flew by in a rhythm only doctors understand. Patient after patient sat before him with ailments ranging from the mundane to the serious. Carter listened carefully, never rushing, never dismissing concerns. He explained things in plain language, often drawing quick sketches on notepads to make complex medical issues clear. A grandmother with aching joints left smiling, reassured that her discomfort could be managed. A nervous teenager struggling with asthma walked out with not just medication, but the confidence that someone genuinely cared about his future. By midday, Carter paused only briefly, sipping water as he looked out the window toward the street where the incident with the officers had occurred. A part of him still simmered at the memory, but another part felt resigned. This was not the first time he'd been mistaken for someone out of place in his own space, and he doubted it would be the last. Yet he also knew his role required him to carry himself above such moments. His patients needed a healer, not a man distracted by indignities. Around 1 o'clock, he left the clinic for a short drive to the regional hospital headquarters. His car, a practical sedan, pulled into a reserved space near the administrative wing. Unlike the modest clinic, the hospital was a sprawling complex, bustling with specialists, surgeons, administrators, and staff. Here, his presence commanded a different kind of respect. Doctors nodded, administrators stood straighter when he entered, and board members deferred to his judgment. The afternoon was filled with strategic meetings. They discussed budgets, staffing shortages, expansion projects, and new partnerships with medical schools. Carter listened intently, asking pointed questions, offering solutions that balanced both business efficiency and patient welfare. His voice carried authority not because of arrogance, but because it was grounded in years of hands-on experience. He wasn't a leader who sat in ivory towers. He still walked hospital corridors, still checked on patients, still rolled up his sleeves when necessary. One administrator leaned across the table during a heated budget discussion. "Dr. Carter, we simply don't have the funds for another community clinic. We're stretched too thin as it is." Carter's response was measured but firm. "We can't afford not to open it. These neighborhoods are underserved. Every emergency room visit costs 3 times what a clinic visit would. Investing now saves us all later." Silence followed. It wasn't the first time Carter had persuaded them with logic rooted in both compassion and practicality. Eventually, the board agreed to explore his proposal. By the time evening approached, Carter was back at his Main Street clinic, checking on the last patients before closing. He believed in ending his day where it mattered most, face-to-face with the people who reminded him why he had chosen this path. His staff admired him not just for his medical skill, but for his consistency. He never let his high-ranking responsibilities overshadow the personal touch that defined him. Later, as the clinic lights dimmed, Carter sat briefly in his office, jotting notes in his journal. It was a habit he had kept since his days as a medical student, recording not just medical observations but reflections on people, decisions, and lessons learned. That day's entry carried a line that hinted at the earlier encounter. Respect must never be optional in a place of healing. One day, others will see the truth behind a uniform, just as I see the truth behind every patient's eyes. As he locked up and stepped into the cool night air, the memory of Sergeant Harris's suspicion flickered again. Carter shook his head. Tomorrow would bring more patients, more challenges, and perhaps more misunderstandings. But he knew who he was, and so did everyone whose lives he touched. And in the quiet strength of that knowledge, Elijah Carter walked toward his car, ready to face another day. The next morning came early for Dr. Elijah Carter, as it always did. Sleep never lingered long in his world. There were too many responsibilities waiting the moment he rose. By 6 a.m., he was already reviewing patient files at his kitchen table, sipping strong black coffee and making careful notes about cases that needed follow-ups. His schedule was demanding, but he welcomed the rhythm of it. Service wasn't a burden. It was his calling. By 7:30, his car rolled into the familiar lot of the Carter Community Health Clinic. The modest brick building stood as both a medical center and a symbol. Years ago, this neighborhood had been written off as too poor, too problematic, too overlooked for serious investment. Yet here was a thriving clinic, a place families trusted, a place that carried his name. As he stepped out of his car, a few pedestrians on their way to work nodded and greeted him warmly. "Morning, Doc," shouted an older man carrying a newspaper. "Morning, Mr. Jenkins," Carter replied with a smile. "How's the knee holding up?" "Better every day since that injection you gave me," the man said, waving before continuing down the street. Inside, the clinic was already alive with activity. The reception desk buzzed with phone calls. Nurses moved briskly between rooms, checking supplies, preparing charts. Patients sat patiently in the waiting area, some with weary eyes, others with quiet hope. Carter slipped into his routine seamlessly, shaking hands, offering reassuring words, scanning charts, and listening intently. Around 10 o'clock, the clinic grew especially crowded. A line of walk-ins had formed, many hoping Carter himself would see them. A single mother worried about her son's recurring fever. A construction worker asked for clearance to return to work after an injury. An elderly woman sought comfort for a shortness of breath. Each encounter reminded Carter why he had chosen his profession and why he had never left his community for more lucrative offers elsewhere. As the late morning lull approached, Carter finally allowed himself a brief pause. He stepped into his office, loosened his tie, and checked his phone. Several missed calls blinked across the screen, most from the hospital's administrative staff. He sighed. There was always another issue demanding his attention: funding concerns, recruitment efforts, board meetings. He would have to return those calls eventually. For now, he decided to take a moment outside. Sometimes, a breath of fresh air was the only way to clear his mind between patient visits. He slipped his phone into his hand, shrugged into his white coat, and walked out through the clinic's front doors. The midday sun hung bright overhead. Main Street was alive with its usual chorus of honking cars, chatter from pedestrians, and the occasional bark of a dog tied up near a storefront. Carter leaned against a low railing near the entrance of the clinic. Phone pressed his ear as he dialed a hospital administrator. His tone was calm, professional, though a furrow formed across his brow as he discussed staffing shortages at one of the partner facilities. He was so absorbed in the conversation that he didn't immediately notice the black and white patrol car creeping slowly down the street. Inside, two uniformed officers scanned their surroundings with the sharp, suspicious eyes that come with training, or in the case of Sergeant Harris, with years of hardened prejudice. From behind the windshield, Carter might look like just another man lingering on the street corner. His phone call, his posture, even the way he leaned on the railing, small details that meant nothing to passers-by, were all filtered through the officer's assumptions. "There," Harris muttered to his rookie partner, Daniel Murphy. "See him? Standing around outside like he's waiting for something. Doesn't look right." Daniel glanced over to him. It looked like nothing more than a doctor making a call outside his clinic, but Harris's voice carried weight. "Looks fine to me, Sergeant. He's wearing a white coat." Probably staff. Harris scoffed. Or he's posing. You'll learn quick, Murphy. Not everyone out here is who they claim to be. Trust your gut, and mine's telling me this guy's trouble. The cruiser slowed, then rolled to stop directly in front of the clinic. Pedestrians noticed immediately. The presence of a patrol car was never subtle in this part of town. Conversations hushed, eyes turned, curiosity stirred. Carter glanced up, phone still to his ear. His brows knitted slightly, though he continued his conversation for a few more seconds before politely excusing himself and hanging up. He slipped the phone into his pocket, watching as the two officers stepped out of the car. Harris adjusted his duty belt with deliberate authority, walking with the swagger of someone used to commanding obedience. Daniel followed, his nerves tight, every movement careful. This was his first week, his first lessons unfolding in real time. "Afternoon, sir," Harris began, his tone more interrogative than polite. "Can we ask what you're doing out here?" Carter straightened, his calm demeanor steady as always. "I'm making a phone call, officer. Just stepped out from my clinic." He gestured toward the building behind him. Daniel noticed the clear signage on the door, Carter Community Health Clinic. Even the name matched the man. But Harris didn't seem convinced. "Your clinic? Huh?" Harris pressed. "Funny, most business owners don't just stand around outside. Got some identification?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "I'm Dr. Elijah Carter. My staff inside can confirm that. I've been running this clinic for years." By now, a few patients inside had noticed the scene unfolding through the glass doors. One nurse whispered urgently to another, pointing toward the entrance. A couple of bystanders on the sidewalk slowed, sensing tension in the air. Daniel shifted uneasily, remembering the Academy's teachings about de-escalation. Everything about Carter's manner suggested credibility, yet Harris's suspicions seemed unshakable. The rookie kept quiet, not daring to contradict his superior so soon into his career. "Words don't mean much without proof," Harris said, folding his arms. "Let's see that ID." Carter exhaled slowly, reaching into his pocket. His movements were deliberate, careful, the kind honed by years of knowing exactly how his actions might be misinterpreted. He retrieved his wallet and extended his identification calmly. Harris snatched it, scrutinizing the card as though it were a forgery. "Dr. Elijah Carter," Harris read aloud, his tone skeptical. "Owner and director." He looked back at the building, then at Carter. Convenient. Inside the clinic, more faces pressed against the glass, staff and patients alike frowning at the scene. The unease was growing. A few community members walking by stopped outright, crossing their arms, watching closely. Daniel's throat tightened. He could feel the weight of every eye. The invisible line being drawn between a respected doctor and the officers who questioned his right to stand outside his own workplace. The rookie's gut told him this was wrong, but his training and his fear of crossing Harris kept him silent. Carter, for his part, remained calm. His eyes were steady, his voice unwavering. "Sergeant, you have my ID, and the clinic bears my name. What exactly is the problem here?" Harris didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked, as though chewing on a response. The patrol car slowed to a crawl in front of the clinic, its presence heavier than the traffic noise around it. Officer Daniels gripped the steering wheel tightly while the rookie, Martinez, leaned forward in his seat, trying to size up the man standing calmly on the sidewalk. Dr. Elijah Carter had just finished his phone call, slipping the device back into his pocket. But the officers saw none of that context. What they noticed instead was a tall black man lingering in front of the clinic at midday, their assumptions coloring everything else. Daniels narrowed his eyes. "See that? Just standing there, looking around. That's how they act when they're scoping a place out." His voice was sharp, practiced in suspicion. Martinez shifted uncomfortably, not fully convinced but unwilling to challenge his senior's interpretation. He had been told since morning that appearances mattered, that instincts were everything. And right now, Daniels' instincts screamed trouble. The cruiser rolled to a stop. Both men stepped out, the sound of their boots clicking against the pavement. The air carried a faint tension, something unspoken that even nearby pedestrians seemed to notice. Dr. Carter, unaware at first, turned his head slightly and saw the uniformed officers approaching with purpose. His brow furrowed in mild confusion, but his posture remained composed, shoulders squared, eyes calm. "Afternoon, officers," he said evenly, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being listened to. But Daniels didn't hear the tone. He only saw what he believed, a man trying to appear too calm, too unbothered. "Sir, we've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Daniels said, though no such report existed. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" His tone was inquisitive. It was accusatory. Carter blinked, then gestured with an open hand toward the clinic door just behind him. "This is my clinic. I stepped outside to take a phone call. Is there a problem?" Martinez's eyes flicked to the sign above the door, Carter Medical Center, but he said nothing. His training urged him to defer, to let Daniels lead. Daniels, meanwhile, ignored the obvious. "Your clinic?" His words carried disbelief. "We'll need to see some identification." The demand landed like a challenge. Carter's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, careful not to move suddenly. Years of living in a world where his actions were scrutinized taught him caution. He pulled out his wallet, sliding free a driver's license and professional ID badge. He extended them calmly. Daniels barely glanced at the documents before waving them off. "Anyone could print one of these. Doesn't mean you belong here." His words were dismissive, dismissing not just the IDs, but the man himself. A woman exiting the clinic stopped short when she saw the scene unfolding. She was an elderly patient, leaning on a cane, her eyes widening. "That's Dr. Carter," she said aloud, her voice carrying concern. "He's my doctor." But Daniels barely turned his head. "Ma'am, please step aside. We're handling official business." The patient hesitated, frowning, but shuffled away reluctantly. More people began to notice. Two young men across the street paused mid-conversation. A mother tugged her child closer as she passed, and within minutes a small but attentive audience was forming. Carter took a steadying breath. He understood what was happening, but experience told him that calmness was his only weapon. "Officers," he began again, voice measured, "I've worked in this community for decades. You're standing outside my place of practice. If you'd like to step inside, I can show you more than identification. You'll meet my staff, my patients." Martinez's lips pressed together. Part of him wanted to accept the offer. It sounded reasonable, after all, but Daniel shook his head sharply, cutting off the possibility. "Don't try to get clever with us. You're loitering, maybe casing the place. Or worse." The words hit hard. Dr. Carter felt the sting of the baseless accusations, but he didn't let it show. His voice remained calm, almost too calm for the situation, which only seemed to make Daniels bristle more. "Hands where I can see them," Daniels ordered suddenly, his hand resting near his holstered weapon. The rookie copied the movement, though hesitantly. The tension in the air thickened, visible even to the onlookers. Gasps echoed from the gathering crowd, and whispers started to ripple. Why are they bothering him? "That's Dr. Carter. Isn't it obvious?" Inside the clinic, a nurse peered out through the glass door, eyes wide. She whispered urgently to another staff member, who quickly pulled out a phone, ready to call someone, maybe hospital administrators, maybe lawyers, maybe the local news. Something about the way Daniel squared his shoulders told her this wasn't going to de-escalate quickly. Carter raised his palm slightly, not in surrender, but in patience. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not loitering. I'm the physician who runs this facility. You're welcome to come inside and verify." But Daniels' mind was already made up. He interpreted Carter's calm tone as arrogance, the raised palms as defiance. The logic twisted itself, as it so often did, into justification for suspicion. "You think you're smarter than us, huh?" he said harshly. "That's the problem with guys like you." Martinez's stomach churned. He glanced again at the ID in Daniels' hand, then at the sign, then at Carter's composed face. Doubt gnawed at him, but his loyalty to procedure, or at least to the senior, kept him silent. He felt the eyes of the crowd burning into his back, judging him not just as a rookie, but as a man in uniform. The murmur of voices grew louder as more people stopped to watch. Some pulled out phones, quietly recording the interaction. A teenage boy whispered his friend, "That's the doctor who helped my grandma last year." The friend nodded, frowning. Already, the narrative was shifting. Not just a random man questioned by police, but their doctor, their community leader, being treated like a criminal. Carter noticed a gathering crowd. Too. A part of him took solace in it. Witnesses meant he wasn't alone, even if they couldn't intervene directly. Still, he understood the danger. A tense officer, an escalating misunderstanding, and a weapon within reach. "Officer," Carter said carefully, lowering his voice to a steady baritone. "I've dedicated my life to this community. Harassing me outside my own clinic does nothing for safety. If you truly want to protect this neighborhood, perhaps we should talk about real issues, access to care, poverty, addiction. Those are threats I face daily, inside those walls." For a brief moment, Martinez looked at him not as a suspect, but as someone wise, someone with gravity. But Daniel scoffed, unimpressed. "Save the speeches. You're stalling, maybe hiding something." "Rookie, check the perimeter." Martinez hesitated. He didn't want to leave, didn't want to participate in this farce, but Daniel's glare pushed him forward. As he circled the building, Martinez caught the eyes of more patients inside the waiting room, pressed to the glass in disbelief. They mouthed the same thing over and over. "He's the doctor. That's his place." By the time Martinez returned, the tension had doubled. Daniels had stepped closer to Carter, invading his space, voice low and threatening. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," he muttered. Carter stood tall, refusing to be intimidated, though his pulse quickened. He thought of his patients inside, of his staff, of the example this moment was setting for the watching community. Calm, he reminded himself. Always calm. The rookie's return didn't change Daniel's posture. If anything, it reinforced his authority. Martinez said nothing, just shook his head slightly. There was nothing suspicious outside. Daniels ignored it. "Thought so," he said dismissively, pretending the search had been worthwhile. By now, the murmurs of the crowd were clear and pointed. "This is wrong. That's harassment. Why won't they just listen?" Phones recorded every angle, every word. The balance of power began to shift, not physically, but socially. The officers were no longer invisible in their authority. They were accountable to the witnesses. Carter sensed it, too. He knew the truth would surface eventually, but in the meantime he remained still, his eyes locked on Daniel's. "Officer," he repeated one final time, "I have nothing to hide. The longer this goes on, the more obvious that will become." Daniels clenched his jaw. Authority challenged, pride pricked. He refused to yield. The tension outside the clinic was already thick, and when the first few onlookers stopped to see what was happening, it was as though the air grew heavier. Main Street was rarely quiet, especially on weekday mornings. Cars slowed as they passed. Curious glances thrown toward the spectacle of two uniformed officers challenging a man outside the familiar clinic. It didn't take long before people began recognizing who the man at the center of the confrontation was. Dr. Elijah Carter wasn't just any man on the sidewalk. He was their doctor, their neighbor, their friend. His presence outside the clinic was so ordinary that the fact he was being treated like a criminal seemed absurd. "Wait a second," murmured Mrs. Reynolds, a woman in her 60s who had come for her regular blood pressure check. She stood frozen on the steps of the clinic, her grocery bag tucked under one arm. "That's Dr. Carter. What are they doing to him?" Her voice carried just enough for others nearby to turn their heads. Two young men at the corner, leaning against their bikes, looked over and immediately recognized him as well. "That's the doc," one whispered. Within moments, whispers spread, and people slowly began to cluster around, their curiosity morphing into indignation. Elijah Carter kept his posture composed. His hands relaxed at his sides, though his heart was pounding. He had spent years building this clinic into a safe space, a place of healing and trust. To be standing outside of it now, treated as if he were trespassing on his own property, was surreal. He tried again to explain. "Officers, I am Dr. Elijah Carter. This is my clinic. I stepped out to make a phone call, nothing more. His words were calm, precise, but once again they seemed to vanish into the humid morning air, unheard by the officers who had already decided what they thought of him. The rookie shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado slipping in the face of the gathering crowd. He hadn't expected people to rally so quickly, and the intensity of their stares made his palms sweat. Still, his training and his partner's stern presence kept him rigid. "Sir," the rookie said, forcing authority into his voice, "we need you to answer our questions directly. What exactly are you doing here?" The question was absurd, and Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose, though he refused to let sarcasm seep into his tone. "I am standing outside my clinic, officer, which I own and where I work daily. These people know me. Ask them." That suggestion seemed to irritate the senior officer. He stepped closer, voice lowering into something harsher. "Don't try to turn this around. We'll ask the questions here. And if you don't cooperate, this situation is going to escalate quickly." His words were designed to intimidate, and for a moment the air seemed to still. Then, like a ripple, voices from the crowd broke through. "He's telling the truth," called out a young mother holding her child on her hip. "That's our doctor. He treated my baby when she was sick last winter." "Yeah, that's Dr. Carter," shouted another man from across the street. "What the hell are you bothering him for?" The chorus grew, tentative at first, but steady enough to show unity. Strangers who didn't know one another personally now found themselves bound together by their defense of a man they all respected. For years, Dr. Carter had been the quiet constant in their community. Never flashy, never seeking attention, but always there when someone was in need. He had delivered babies, treated injuries, consoled families after diagnoses, and sometimes simply offered an ear when life became too heavy. To see him treated as a suspect cut deeply, and people were unwilling to stay silent. The officers, however, seemed unmoved. The senior officer's eyes scanned the crowd with irritation, muttering under his breath about interference. He raised his voice. "Everyone needs to step back. This is an official police business. Disperse now or face consequences." His command fell flat. Instead of dispersing, the crowd inched closer, their murmurs growing louder. Phones began to appear, first one, then several. The sight of recording devices unsettled the rookie more than anything else. He'd been told in training that being recorded was part of modern policing, but living it was something different. Every move, every word, every misplaced gesture could end up online, dissected by thousands. He glanced nervously at his partner, who shot him a look that said, "Stay focused." Elijah noticed the phones too, but he didn't move to capitalize on them. He wasn't the type to perform for the cameras. Instead, he stood straighter, his calm demeanor only making the officer's aggressive stance seem harsher in contrast. Inside, however, he was seething. He had fought his entire life to earn respect, to build something of value in a world that often underestimated him because of the color of his skin. And here he was outside the clinic he had poured his soul into, being asked if he belonged. The sting was sharp, but he knew better than to lash out. His community was watching. His patients were watching. Any wrong move could jeopardize everything he had built. Mrs. Reynolds, still clutching her grocery bag, finally stepped forward, her frail voice trembling with both fear and determination. "Officers, you must be mistaken. This man has been my doctor for years. He belongs here more than anyone else. You're embarrassing yourselves." Her courage sparked others. Soon, more voices joined, louder, angrier. "This is harassment," someone yelled. "Leave the doctor alone." The officers barked back, ordering the crowd to stay quiet, but it was too late. The scene was no longer just an encounter. It was a confrontation witnessed by dozens. The rookie felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had started this day full of eagerness, excited to prove himself, to wear the badge with pride. Now he felt himself sinking in quicksand, every decision threatening to drag him deeper. He wasn't blind. He could see the respect these people had for Carter. He could hear the sincerity in their voices. A gnawing doubt grew in his mind. Maybe they had gotten this wrong. Maybe this man wasn't the problem. But his partner's rigid stance and commanding tone boxed him in, leaving no room for second-guessing.